Greetings, survivors and friends, SHADOWFRAX here, and today we're going to be looking at something that's kind of become a tradition on this channel around this time of year, and that is having a good, hard look at the Rust roadmap to kind of give a long-range forecast, if possible, of what we might expect to see flopping out of the end of the rusty pipe in the hopefully not too distant future. I mean, that's kind of what I do every week in my update vids, but hey, now this year is a little bit different to last, I must admit, as you may remember that the old roadmap was taken offline in June of this year and very bravely replaced with a kind of suggestion box / roadmap hybrid affair on Nalt.io, which not only allows members of the public to make incredibly intelligent suggestions for Rust, but also allows them to be voted up, down, sideways, and ultimately used to build up a brand new roadmap at Facepunch's discretion. Well, that's the idea. Now, this ain't to say that the old roadmap was just scrapped. I think it's safe to say that the contents are still languishing in a moist corner of concept limbo somewhere, and if you want to know exactly what was in that roadmap, then the contents are mostly immortalized in last year's Roundup video, and there should be a link on the screen to that about now, if I've done my job properly. But what I'm going to do today is take a look at what's currently planned, being mulled over or researched, what's been so far rejected, and what your top rated community suggestions are at this very moment. And you'll notice that, unlike the previous version, there are no forecast dates on this one. I think they realised after a while that wasn't a great idea. But first, necessity dictates that I have to take on the occasional sponsor to keep pies on the table. Talking of which, what's this? A decent single-player Star Wars game? Surprised to be sure, but a welcome one. This is Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order, which is getting some very good reviews at the moment, and which is coincidentally available on the Epic Games Store for a mere $59.99. Link is down below in the description, which will also bag you a free Imperial Stormtrooper skin in Fortnite. Wow. Hold me down. Taking place after the events of Revenge of the Sith, all the Jedi have been murderized by Palpatine. Or so it would seem, because you play as Cal, a Padawan who managed to bravely run away and live a quiet life in the countryside. However, he's soon dragged back into the never-ending struggle between the light and dark side, must team up with the Resistance, uncover a hidden list of Force-sensitive children, and ultimately rebuild the Jedi Order. There are lots of lightsabers, explosions, incredible environments, and everything you could possibly hope and dream of seeing in the Star Wars universe, but with better acting. So click on the link below and get it today, and thanks to Epic for sponsoring this video. Cheers, back to the roadmap, and I'll also slap a link below for you to check it out yourself in case you haven't already. In fact, it may be that you've never seen this. But anyway, we'll start with the roadmap tab, which shows us what's in progress, planned, researching, which basically means thinking about it without committing to anything, rejected, and completed. So currently in progress we have musical instruments. As I speak, these are on staging, they're almost fully functional, and will no doubt disappear from this section in a week or so if the team update the site in a timely fashion. Next are gestures, which we saw some work done on in June of this year, and which we can now kind of use with a bit of jiggery-pokery. However, these were kind of slid onto a back burner surreptitiously to make way for work on more important features, like instruments, etc. Lastly in progress is switching Unity to HDRP, and I've spoken at great length about this already. HDRP stands for High Definition Render Pipeline, and the aim of this is to not just improve Rust's visuals and lighting, but also to possibly even increase performance at the same time. Although we'll have to wait for the end results to see whether that's actually the case. This is a pretty humongous effort, and it probably won't be until 2020 before we see the fruits of it. But in the meantime, some rather sexy visuals continue to leak out via Facepunch's Instagram page. Now, here is where I wouldn't take this new roadmap as a comprehensive list of everything the team are working on. Remember, these are all taken from community suggestions, with the exception of a couple, such as HDRP, which were inserted by Gary, and I think there's a lot more going on that we don't see. For instance, vehicles aren't mentioned here at all, yet we all know what's going on with those, I think. The planned section of the roadmap is next, and this is a bit meatier. Basically, these are a definite, but no promises on when, lads. New weather types was an early one, but was also on the old roadmap, so no surprise to see it here. These could include, but not be limited to, fog, rain, thunderstorms, complete with lightning strikes, perhaps making wooden armor more desirable, snow, colder rain but slower and more flaky, and rad storms. So we're pretty much talking about turning Rust Island into Birmingham here. A new game trailer is next, and although the current one on Steam is very good, it's sadly a time capsule of how Rust looked 2 years ago, and when HDRP comes in next year it's going to look like the PS1 version, which is probably why you shouldn't expect a new one until then. Now here's where it starts getting interesting. Long-term viewers will remember that I first covered the concept of player deployable CCTV a long time ago, and although there have been various plugins to emulate it, a proper inbuilt system is now looking very plausible, with electricity being already in place and the recent reveal regarding the upcoming companion app that may or may not let us stalk players in-game from the comfort of our phones, but it definitely should. In a similar vein, making searchlights electric makes sense, firstly because they'd be falling in line with ceiling lights and turrets that are now dependent on generated power, but also that there could be more to them, i.e. being able to switch them on remotely, and perhaps having an auto-tracking function that could highlight and follow players who wander into their radius. A suggestion now close to my heart. Tier 2 cooking is another subject I've waxed lyrical about before. The food we have currently is still very basic, and the only recipes to follow consist of exposed to a flame until suitably heat sealed. Imagine being able to craft more complex dishes that could then provide boosts to certain stats. It would definitely give us more to do at night. It's interesting that the poster of this one opened with using an oven to bake pie, but I'll be returning to that idea in a bit. Better terrain was suggestion number 503, with the complaints including stretched textures, floating boulders, and inconvenient cliffs. I know that in amongst the changes coming from HDRP there is a lot of texture-related work and indeed changes to procedural generation, so this might be something that gets resolved relatively soon. Just when you thought it was safe to go into the water, scientist patrol boats are next. Another relatively early suggestion, and yes, it looks like maybe at some point roaming reefs full of scientists will be checking up on the security of their precious junk piles, or maybe even making sure nobody escapes the island. Floating arrows go bye-bye. Really doesn't need much explanation, and as the poster says, he actually tries to shoot barrels near the ground to keep the immersion real, because Rust is so hyper-realistic after all. I know this problem was inadvertently fixed a while back due to a regression or something, and it depended on how close to the centre of the map you were, but it was quickly broken again. Would be nice to say bye-bye to it finally. Lastly, in the planned section... Hang on, what's this doing here? Maybe this isn't as up-to-date as I thought it was. Anyway, a console version is planned. Now, we come on to researching, which if I had to explain it with a noise would be kind of whereas planned would be more of a It's basically a bit less of a committed version. Google Stadia is first, and although it's had its share of teething issues so far, Gary tried it recently and said he was impressed by how it handled first-person mouse-controlled shooters. Which sounds positive for a certain game. Maybe. Next, there's teammate indicator on compass, and you can't fault the logic of this one. Add an indicator, maybe a green line or dot on the compass so you can quickly assess the direction of teammates without opening up the map and zooming in and out repeatedly. Make fireplaces heat bases. You remember nearly 2 years ago when we got those massive great fireplaces for Christmas, and then Helk said that moving forward we would like to modify it so it heats the entire house / any connected building blocks that are indoors. Well, someone decided to remind him that millions of people are still freezing to death in the Arctic waiting for this to happen, so now it's in resurging, which is better than nothing, I guess. And lastly, one that's perhaps a bit more for the modders, network entity scale to clients, and as explained is really to allow Oxide plugins to spawn prefabs with different sizes. I wouldn't lose too much sleep over this one, but just know that it's being considered. Lastly, on the roadmap, the section which will be least popular with many I'm sure, and I apologise now, the rejected section, a place where dreams are crushed beneath the capricious development boot of destiny. Or something like that. Funnily enough, making the nights lighter was suggestion number 4, and made by Gary, who said that moonlight should illuminate the world and allow people to see in the dark at night. But Rust isn't Gary's game, and even he isn't immune to rejection. So yeah, I guess we need more stuff to do at night then. I did warn you. Next is halving the cost of half walls, and again, you can't fault the real world logic of this one. It's like someone selling you half a game for the price of a full one. Oh, they do that, don't they? Bad example. Well, to be fair, there's more here than meets the eyes, and there are base design and raiding implications to take into consideration, so this one was rejected. Right, so I guess it's time for me to face this one now. My own personal trigger. And I want to say I didn't suggest this one myself or prompt it in any way, despite my name being invoked many times in the comments. I didn't need to, because it was a no-brainer. Add edible pies. I think it will massively add to immersion of the game. They can be made of pumpkins or something. If there ever was a logical argument in this world, you just heard it. This suggestion, as you will see, soared up the most voted list, even reaching 5th at one point before being shot down in its prime, and I can only assume this rejection is some massive troll, because Tier 2 cooking will be an absolute sham without it. Okay, now let's take a quick swipe at the top 10 community suggestions as voted for by the community, and some of these we've already covered, such as number 10, better terrain. Skip that then. At number 9, one I personally agree with, expanding the primitive part of Rust, adding more primitive weapons, for instance. We'll skip the next two again, half walls and fireplaces heating bases, and there it is, at number 6, pie. F. At 5, the projectile invalid issue that many have, and I'm no dev so I don't know the solution for Rust, but at least it hasn't been rejected, like pie. Number 4 is weather types, also covered already, but the top 3 are definitely fresh. A train monument is next. Basically, a working train that goes around the map on a track, like the cargo ship. Actually, trains were on the old roadmap. They snuck in right at the end, and it would make sense as a few monuments do have train tracks that just peter out. Perhaps these could all be joined up like the road network, but it would be a feat to do this procedurally and get them to play nicely with the roads. Also, would it be a scientist-driven thing, or would players be able to use them to shuttle around? A recent community plugin I saw regarding this was interesting. At number 2, we have buffing the harbours, which don't have much to offer relative to their size, it must be said, and I think I agree with this one. And at number 1, making all role-player items default blueprints. With the proliferation of new items to learn blueprints for over the last year, including many electrical components, it would make sense to make the less strategic role-player ones default. And it seems the majority of people agree. But what do you think? And what would be your number 1 suggestion? Apart from pie, of course. In fact, what do you think to everything on the roadmap at the moment? Did you know about this site? Have you used it recently? Don't forget, this is a place where you can contribute to Rust development, in a way, so it might be worth a bookmark. Likes and subscribes are always welcome, of course. I stream on Twitch 3 times a week, and you can keep up to date with me on Twitter, Facebook, Discord, and my Steam group. I shall catch you all soon, but in the meantime, keep calm and stay rusty. Cheerio. F.